There you
There
go.
we go. Okay.
I could lift you up. I could show you what you wanna see and take you where you wanna be. You could be my luck. Even if the sky is falling down, I know that we'll be safe and sound. Sound check. How was that?
Sounds great.
You can hear the piano and everything? Okay,
Seeing
good.
some clapping. We could hear the piano. I think it's a great way to begin. Should we wait another
Yes.
moment, Olivia, or what do you think?
Go for it.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the second installment of the International Armenian Literary Alliance's Standing on the Moon, Lyrical Imagination. It's a virtual event that explores the intersection between lyric writing and literature through performance and conversation. Though there has always been a connection between songwriting and literature, the consideration of the former as the latter still comes as a surprise to some. In his acceptance speech at the Nobel banquet in Stockholm City Hall on December 10th, 2016, Bob Dylan wrote, "If someone had ever told me that I had the slightest chance of winning the Nobel Prize in literature, I would have to think that I'd have about the same odds as standing on the moon." So that phrase, standing on the moon, is the impetus for this inquiry today and the title of our series. And it's about the power of language as it functions within the paradigm of music. My name is Alan Semerdjian. I'm a poet and educator, musician, advisory board member of Yalla, and the founder and the host of this relatively new offering we have. Last year's installment, which can be found on Yalla's website, featured Seema Cunningham of the Chicago art rock group Phenom, and most recently played alongside frontman from Wilco, Jeff Tweedy's solo project. Today we have with us from the West Coast of the United States, Sebu Simonian, one half of the indie and electro pop globetrotters, capital cities, and indeed an extraordinarily talented and prolific songwriter. Sebu is an LA-based recording artist and music producer whose career is defined by a refusal to stay in one lane. Born in Syria and raised in a Southern California Armenian household, he is a classically trained music major who turned down an opera scholarship to pursue rock music. A formative chapter as a prolific jingle writer sharpened his ability to jump between genres, a versatility that eventually birthed Capital Cities. I believe it was 2011. Their multi-platinum Grammy-nominated anthem, Safe and Sound, remains a cultural staple, continuing to find new life across generations. Today, Sebu bridges his deep heritage with modern production. His recent work centers on the legacy of Armenian icon Gomitas, reimagining the master's folk classics for a new audience. His latest release, I Came Down from the Mountain, serves as a stunning bilingual bridge between his classical roots and contemporary vision. So I imagine we'll talk about Gomidas and capital cities and everything in between. But before we start our talk, I want to welcome Sebu to Yalla Standing on the Moon, the Lyrical Imagination. Welcome, Sebu.
Thank you for having me.
It is absolutely our pleasure.
This is
So
really
I just
cool.
want to jump right into the conversation. And I just want to also, before we do that, if you have questions, dear guests, please, you can ask them in the chat, but we'll allot some time for that toward the end of our conversation and performance. Sebu is going to perform as well, and we have some videos that we'll share, excerpts of some videos. So I just want to start off with just like a sort of opening question. What do you think about with regard to the relationship between lyrics and music? Like when you're writing I know you write, I know you have collaborated on writing lyrics, but I know you, obviously your solo work, you write all your lyrics. Can you just talk a little bit about your relationship, like what you think about when you're writing lyrics, and how much of that is connected to the composition of the music?
Yeah, I think lyrics and poetry using words to express ideas and feelings are very different than making music and creating melodies and sounds that provoke emotions and feelings. I think music is obviously more visceral. It's more primal because in nature, sounds are what drive our instincts. If we hear a thunder or a roar or something out in nature, it usually provokes some kind of a fight or flight response, let's say. So it stirs the emotion and then gets your adrenaline pumping. So music has become something that human beings have been able to manipulate in very specific ways with melodies and percussions and rhythms and all kinds of elements musically to kind of stir your emotions and create some kind of emotional impact. But then when you apply words to it, you really direct and focus and guide the listener to have that emotion. So it's like this incredible combination of two different arts, sound and words. Everybody realizes that most pop music that uses lyrics are generally superficial and simple. And a lot of times there's an opportunity missed there by songwriters to focus too much on the melody and the production style or whatever, and not really take a moment and focus on the lyrics and make it just a bit more poetic and more deep or interesting or twisted. And I feel like earlier in my career, my lyrics were a little bit more not simpler, but I didn't focus as much on it. And I realized over time that I actually prefer the lyric writing part of songwriting even more than the music. I mean, it used to be more about the music, and then the lyrics were here, and then over time they've kind of gotten more even, and the lyrics have kind of taken more of an important role in the process. I love wordplay, and recently, over the last 10 years actually, I've been exploring Komitas and his Armenian lyrics and realizing how unique and kind of extraordinary his lyrics were. And then in the process of trying to understand what they mean and what the messages were, I realized that the Armenian language was so different than the English language. You couldn't just simply translate Gomidas songs into English. I wanted to. I made an effort, and I feel like I've succeeded with at least 2 songs. And I'm realizing that every language is so different rhythmically. You could say a thought in Armenian with just 2 words, for example. I'm trying to think of a line that Gomidas says. He's talking about his joy at one point, and he says, "Zovnangav,"
Zovngav, like
Zovnangav. Khundumus, my joy, Zovnangav. It's like, oh, okay, simple enough. I can translate that. My joy fell into the ocean. Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't have that same kind of poetic impact that you would have in Armenian. Vice versa, there are English phrases that you just can't translate into Armenian. It just doesn't make sense because there's so much context. Even culturally, Dziranizar, right? It starts off with the line, Dziranizar bar midar, right? Like such, and bar means ber, like berk, like fruit, okay? So apricot tree do not bear fruit for me, is how I translated it. And that was the closest I could get to coming to the intended message that Gomidas had. And even then, it doesn't really have that same impact as Dziranizar bar midar. First of all, rhythmically, there's a lack of rhythm there. Dziranizar bar midar has a rhythm to it, whereas in English, apricot tree, do not bear fruit for me. It loses a rhythm. And of course, apricot tree to a non-Armenian doesn't have that same emotional relevance in their lives, because most, let's say, Americans don't think about apricot trees, or it's not a part of their culture. So for us, an apricot tree is something special, something personal, something,
Symbolic. Yeah.
symbolic. Whereas for a non-Armenian speaker, they won't understand what's so special. Why are you saying apricot tree? Big deal, right?
Yeah.
So, I forgot what your question was, but lyrics are very important, and it's a tool, and it functions differently in every language. So there's so much to explore, and I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface. I've been lucky enough to write in all kinds of genres, so lyrically as well. Sometimes it has to be super simple and, like, Walmart level, or it has to be really weird and poetic and twisted. And the reason I've written in so many genres is twofold. I've been in many different types of bands, personal, like side projects and things like that, from like really poppy stuff to heavy rock stuff, to electronic stuff and dance and stuff like that. But I've also written for a lot of commercials. For like about 2 years, I wrote jingles for, they were mostly demos for big ads. I've written
Yeah.
for Home Depot and Coca-Cola and stuff like that. And
That was probably pretty formative for you. I mean, especially with regard to, I mean, you brought up a couple of, considerations, I think, with regard to lyric writing or lyrics and music. I mean, first of all, in translation, especially, is this kind of marriage of sound and word, right? It's not like a poem, which you started off with, which just sort of exists in this space, but the lyric writing exists in a relationship with sound, and particularly in translation too. I think there are some considerations, and then you're bringing up this other interesting consideration of accessibility, and delivering something that will not, I think about this a lot actually with, my own work and some other musicians. What do we compromise sort of the integrity of the literary merit of the work in that in that marriage, let's say, of sound and word? Like, does something get compromised there? And I think you're always sort of dealing with accessibility. I want to deliver the idea. I don't want it to be too opaque. So I think you brought up some interesting considerations there. Do you start with lyrics sometimes, or do you start with the composition, the musical element? I just wanted to sort of follow up with that briefly.
it's always different, depends on where the inspiration comes from. Sometimes I'll be in a very musical mode where I'm just kind of, I don't want to think about things too deeply, lyrically, specific concept, but I just want to kind of get lost in a nice blanket of sound. And it'll start with chords, interesting melodies, maybe a beat. So a lot of times I will start with the production first. But, my brain is always just kind of thinking, what is this going to be about? What kind of emotions is this song making me feel? And I always try to, like, think about catchphrases, think about idioms in any language, come up with my own catchphrases and idioms, because at the end of the day, most of the time I'm trying to write pop songs, simple songs that can get on the radio, and simplicity and less is more approach is always the best for me when it comes to songwriting and lyrics for songs. You're right, accessibility is important. You could say the same thing using a simpler, more common word versus the more eloquent, like
Yes,
longer word.
sure.
But then a lot of people might not, you know, catch it, especially if it's in a song and you're singing it and there's all kinds of other distractions and drums and effects on the vocals. You know how it is when you listen to a song on the radio, you're singing along, you're just singing gibberish. You don't even know what they're singing, but it feels good, so you just kind of sing along. But
It's
you'll
yeah,
catch
it's
on
so
to a catchphrase, the name of the song title, and you hone in on it and turn it into a hook. So when I'm writing songs, I'm also always thinking about hooks, and the hooks could be words
Mhm.
and the melody of those words, or it could be moments in the song that aren't words, like a trumpet line or a very interesting drum pattern that, like, is different, not so typical.
Mhm.
So my brain just starts going all over the place. It may start with music, and then the lyrics will come in. But oftentimes, or just as often, I might just be hanging around and someone will say something interesting. I was like, oh, that's a quirky way to phrase that. That could be a perfect little moment in a song as a catchphrase, as the hook. Let me see if I can turn that into a melody. And so it'll start with a phrase, and of course, when we speak, and all phrases, if you think about it, if you listen carefully, has a melody, you know, has a melody, has a melody, right? So
Ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da. Yeah.
da-da-da, has a melody. Suddenly I've written my melody for the song without realizing, because it's already written. When people speak, they speak in melodies. You have a cool idea, you have a catchphrase. Think about how it was said, because you also want to, the key to a good song is singability. You know, there are some phrases that are very difficult to sing if you don't write them, if you don't write the melody to work with the syllables and the consonants and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
These are fascinating considerations. I think, you know, in terms of your thematic things, I want to bring that up a little bit too. I feel like there's in your writing, there's a kind of a euphoric, almost like an escapism at the heart of many of your lyrics. And I see Edge of Nowhere, I think, is kind of like that. Break Free, I'll See You Later. These come to mind, where it's like this sort of like even in Capital City, Safe and Sound, you know, you gave us a piece. We see this narrator as the embodiment of the other, a lover, you know, the dance floor, a night out, what have you. Like this kind of, I'm going to this place to sort of either find myself or escape something, you know, that is painting us, right? And it's a beautiful trope in so many ways in lyrics, and it's, you know, been around for a long time. I'm taking some liberties, but I think you get the point. There is this kind of like terror out there in the world, but in here with you, we are saved. You know, that's like the lyric. And I've associated that type of thematic construction with lyrics of other electro pop and indie pop bands. Like I think about Depeche Mode, I think about Erasure, I think about, I guess, more modern, contemporary, like Churches, the Scottish indie kind of band. I think of, I don't know, can you talk about this kind of thematic? I love what we're talking about in terms of sound and rhythm and some of the other things you brought up in terms of you know, the figurative language or what have you, symbolism. But I'm curious about this notion of like this theme, this motif in your work. Is this something
Yeah.
you're conscious of that you think about? Is it, or is this something that just comes naturally to you? Or talk about that for a moment if it's okay.
Sure. I like writing as half the time I'll write from personal experiences, and it's an outlet for myself. You know, as a I think most writers function that way. But I also like to step back and try to imagine what other people might be going through in other circumstances that I'm not experiencing myself, and see what comes out. You know. I'm writing stories about other people in a way. So, but also at the same time, I like the most interesting literature for me, or any stories, are the ones that paint two very kind of opposite situations. You know, I like contrast. I like dichotomy. Sun and the moon, you know, light and dark, good and evil. So Safe and Sound is a great example of verses in which doomsday scenes are basically painted, but then it ends with kind of a positive. But who cares? We're safe and sound. We'll be fine. As long as we're together, as long as we're optimistic, we'll be fine. Even if we're dead, we're good. So yeah, I think I like getting dark, especially outside of my Capital Cities project, because Capital Cities is wonderful and it's very positive and shiny and sugary, at least sonically. But if you dig into the lyrics, you'll notice that every song does have like a dark side or a dark moment, or at least a whimsical, twisted moment. But then outside of Capital Cities, I'm a lot more somber and serious, and I get moody and sometimes heavy with my rock bands. I have a number of side projects. Um, but yeah, I mean, to be honest, every song is its own journey, it's its own situation. And so I could describe what I experienced case by case, and I'll tell you that every time it's been, oh, well, this line happened because I experienced this at that moment. And every song is different. I like that. Like every song is an opportunity to do something new.
Yeah, you're mentioning capital cities. Certainly, your work with your partner Ryan Ryan Merchant, right? Yeah, and your other kind of side projects. You do a lot of collaboration, and I think that's really fascinating. I mean, you've collaborated with Serge Tankian, with Brian Wilson. I think I read that you. I mean, really, like there's a range of artists. Andre 2000. I think like you've really been, and I think those experiences. I mean, I'm kind of curious how lyric writing works in those kinds of constructs as well in collaboration. And then maybe we can even talk about your latest project, which you mentioned, which is this, to me, it's a collaboration with Gomidas, the great, composer, Armenian, priest, composer. So maybe we could talk a little bit about what happens when you're working with somebody else, whether they're, alive and with us in the studio or somebody who, a figure such as Gomidas.
Yeah. Well, collaborations are great. I get people reach out to me every once in a while with an interesting idea for a song, and oftentimes it's in a demo state. So with the Serge and Misho collaboration, Misho is an amazing Armenian rapper from Armenia, and Misho's team had this amazing beat and his rap verse over it and everything. It was called Introvert. Call Me Crazy is the catchphrase that I came up with, and I told him let's change the name to Call Me Crazy, but it ended up we stuck with the term introvert as the name of the song. I think parentheses Call Me Crazy. So the demo was a beat, a little verse by Serge as well, a very twisted kind of poetic rambling verse, which was awesome. It really made the song sound like it was a mental kind of psychotic experiment or experience. So that's why I wrote that inspired the lyrics for me. Call me crazy. My feet move fast, but my heart beats slow. So collaboration is great because it'll inspire you to do something you wouldn't have done otherwise, on your own. And so to me, being prolific or producing quantity is more important than quality sometimes, because quantity results in quality ultimately in the long term. The more you put out, the more chances you have of one of those things to really click creatively and marketing wise. You have more opportunities to promote yourself, right? So I've done a lot of collaborations with dance musicians, dance producers. They'll provide like really cool dance beats that already have melodic ideas in there with synths and stuff. So I just tap into those and recreate them with my voice and just add some words and have some fun with them. Oh,
And
and
what
then
about
with
the
Gomidas.
Gomidas?
So with
Yeah, what about the
Gomidas,
Gomidas collaboration?
you know, I just kind of, I don't know how I first got exposed to, I mean, we've all heard Gomidas since we were kids in Armenian households, all the hits that he has, right? But, none of us really take a moment to sit down and dissect what those songs are. And I realized after doing that with just a handful of his classics, that he was actually a rock star back then. Like he would write pop songs that could have stood the test of time, and if you were to rearrange them in today's production styles and just record it kind of in a more modern way, they would actually compete with current pop songs, verse, chorus. It didn't sound classical to me after I started dissecting them. It sounded modern and current and poppy. And then I realized after I studied his story that he really was kind of a rock star that would go on tour, and he went to Europe and he played concerts. And sure, it wasn't a rock band; they were choirs, right? But if you paid attention to the songs, they were pop songs, and he was out there like being a celebrity. And this is like 1912,
Yeah. Turn of the century, right?
1909, right? No recording studios, no internet, no emails, and somehow he's able to arrange and organize with people in Paris and Tiflis and Cairo, and would go there, and travel without airplanes, and do his thing. And I was like, wow, I thought I had it hard, with my band and my means of communication and traveling. Like, how did he pull that off with hundreds of kids, singers, to move choirs around to do his tour, right? It was an intriguing story, and that made me even more inspired to tackle his songs and his lyrics. And so I so far translated or created a hybrid versions of two songs. One is called Yes Saren Gukai, I Came Down from the Mountain, which I was able to release, and it's out online. And the other one's called Ziranizar, and I'm working on a version of that, but that's not ready to share just yet.
Can we hear one of them, Sebu? Right? I know you have the piano, and you were treating us to some
I'm gonna
playing
try my
earlier.
best.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'd love to hear.
time change is really hasn't allowed me to warm up and practice for this, but I'm gonna give it a shot. Okay.
Thank you.
Yesaren Gukai Tuntura Patsi Tseretzotzatara Afarir Latsi Vai, 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 varumem, vai, 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 halvumem, varum, halvumem. I came down from the mountain. You opened the door for me. Placed your hands upon your chest. Oh my, you cried out loud. Why am I burning up? Why am I melting down? Why am I burning up? Why am I melting down? Halvum varvume.
Wow.
So
That was really, really
thank you.
stirring, really interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah.
So I wanted to point out a couple things in the translation process that was interesting. Like in
Please. Yes.
Armenian, halvumem, varvumem. I couldn't translate that to English in a proper way for me to end the English portion of it. So I just switched back to the Armenian. I said, well, this is, I'm not going to be able to sing, I'm melting and I'm, whatever it is. It just didn't flow right. So I just stuck with the Armenian phrase at the very end. And then, for example, in Armenian, vai, 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 varvumem. There isn't like this English, oh my, or what, And I realized why it rhymes with vai. So I said, I
I
have to
heard
just use
that.
the
Yeah.
word why. It doesn't translate perfectly, but it gives the same emotional impact. Why am I burning down instead of vai varvumem, you know? So you have to kind of take some poetic license when you do translations to also make things flow rhythmically and melodically, even if it's not the exact translation.
It's so interesting because the connotation of vai to me has always, as you know, Armenian, it felt like there's like a certain kind of holiness to it, right? And reverence, whereas the why makes it more deeply personal and intimate. Even it's in the translation, you get these kind of nuances, and it's very
Yeah.
fascinating,
And
you know,
you
to
might
make those.
lose
Yeah,
or change the
yeah,
meaning a little
yeah,
bit,
slightly.
but
Um,
you have to
but
just think of the big picture sometimes. Yeah.
that's part of that, you know, collaborative process. I mean, what you're, you know, that sort of stemmed this. I'm wondering what year that particular piece was written. Is it like before Gomidas's, like the deportation, you
Definitely
know,
before. He pretty much did nothing
stopped?
after
Yeah.
1915. He was
I
trying to
mean,
get back to normal for about a year
didn't happen, right? Yeah.
after his thing, but
Yeah.
his mental state deteriorated further throughout that year until finally they decided to hospitalize him, and he was hospitalized in Constantinople for a little while, maybe another year, until he was finally transferred to Paris. So that piece, if I'm not mistaken, was written or at least published in 1909.
In '09, yeah.
But I could be wrong. So he was prolific with these compositions between 1906 and right up until the 1915 April 24 when he was kidnapped.
Yeah, there's another dark corridor of history. You're hearing, you can read in the chat some really interesting comments here. Certainly many nice notes. And Shushan Artinyan adds that "vai" may be translated as a woe, which I think is a beautiful word too. I forgot. It's a
That's a
great way
great
to
one,
put
yeah.
it.
But even
Uh,
then, like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
yeah, it changes. The
it
woe
sounds
in
like Bon
English is
Jovi,
different, isn't it?
right?
Yeah. It's a different woe,
Right? It's a different
right? Like
whoa.
get out of the way or
So you
something.
can't do
Yeah.
it.
It's a little moment of brevity there. So, yeah, thank you for that. So I'm gonna go back to a few more questions, and I know we're gonna kind of lead into a video, and as we move forward, we'll get probably some more commentary from the chat, hopefully some more direct questions for you. With regard to, I was thinking about, this notion of collaboration, but also you do a lot of covers. Like I was thinking of that too. Like you do your work you seem to admire other songwriters and pay homage to them in these really creative and innovative and dynamic ways. And I'm wondering what the role of lyric writing is in those homages. And what I mean by that is like is are like maybe a question is like what's your like are they do you have a favorite lyric written by somebody else that you're like, oh, I wish I wrote that, or and then let's examine what that is maybe, you know?
For sure. Well, I started being in bands when I was 15 in high school, and for the first 2 to 3 years, all we did was covers. We covered almost the entire Pink Floyd repertoire: Beatles, Led Zeppelin, The Doors, the classic rock, the Jimi Hendrix, and so we dissected all of those songs and all of those lyrics, and there's just so many. It's really amazing. And I feel like that was my education in rock music and pop music and
60s and
songwriting.
70s were
Yeah, a
mostly.
lot of 60s and 70s, but I was also a huge fan of 80s bands like Depeche Mode, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
David Bowie. I actually covered and released Space Oddity, an acoustic version of that on my beautiful 1889 Steinway grand piano. It was my pride and joy. Unfortunately, I lost it in the fire last year
Mm,
at the Altadena fire. We lost our home alongside 7,000 other
mm.
households in the
Oh my
neighborhood
goodness.
lost their homes. It was crazy. It was unbelievable. But I'm counting my blessings. Everything's fine. We're moving on. We're rebuilding, all that good stuff. But we did lose that really cool piano. Luckily, I was able to record a really. I'm proud of this cover of David Bowie's Space Oddity, and it's an exercise in lyric writing. It's beautiful. It's simple, and I liked. I wanted to strip it down to its bare minimum so that people actually focus on the lyrics and realize what a pretty song it actually is, besides all the crazy production that everybody's familiar with for the David Bowie version.
Is there something in the lyrics of Space Oddity that intrigues you? And then maybe we can, I know it's a little early, but maybe we can play like a minute or two of that video because we do have it queued up. But is there before we play that, can we is there something in that lyric that struck you as like I want to dive into this further, or somehow it speaks to, the human condition or something, personal to you?
Sure. Well, I just love how it's dramatic or theatrical. It starts off with ground control to Major Tom, right? The speaker or the narrator is this character that isn't even a human being necessarily. It's ground control. It's a collective of people trying to communicate with Major Tom, who's this alienated astronaut who's all by himself in the middle of outer space floating. So that alienation and that loneliness that Major Tom then becomes the narrator and speaks back to ground control is just such a cool, interesting way of presenting a story. It's not typical. Like, oh, I love you, I miss you. Like, it's not a typical love song, and it is at the end of the day a love song because Major Tom references his wife, tell my wife I love her, and it's this like sad moment where it's like, oh wait, are we gonna lose Major Tom forever? Is he gone? Like he's never coming back? So I just like this like game that Bowie plays, as well as all these other great classic songwriters with lyrics. It's a game. There's wordplay, there's stories, there's twists, there's turns. So this is just one example of a great song to cover. I also just sent a link to another cover, random. It's called Pets, and it's my cover of Pets by Porno for Pyros, which if anybody's familiar with early 90s alternative music, it's Perry Farrell's side project. Perry Farrell, of course, from Jane's Addiction. He had this side project called Porno for Pyros, and they have it's a one-hit wonder situation. And it wasn't even like a big hit, actually. It was their big hit.
It's a fantastic song, Sebu. Your version is really beautiful.
This song is just pure genius. The moment I heard it back in the 90s, and yet nobody the world never really gave it the credit it deserved. I have to cover this. And I ended up covering it twice. I covered it with my personal solo project, which is the link I sent you, as well as with my band Capital Cities, a different version, a different arrangement, which we got to play at one of our Coachella appearances. So blessed to have been able to do that. But that version we didn't record an official version of that, but the Coachella recording is out. You could find it on my band's latest album, A Hurricane of Frowns. There's what's it called? Nothing Compares to You on there, another cover. There's Staying
Prince,
Alive.
Prince and Sinead.
There's a lot of covers with Capital Cities. It's really fun. We did a Pink Floyd cover, Breathe.
Bee Gees.
We did a Bee Gees cover.
Yeah.
It's fun because not only do you get to pay homage to your, influences, your idols, but also it's an opportunity to showcase, in my case, the ability to really twist it and change the song and the production so that you could listen to it in a different way, and expose some of the things the song is strong in, like the lyrics, for example, that the original version doesn't highlight as good, let's say. Covers are fun.
I wanted to also ask you, you bring up pets, which is a peculiar imaginative understanding of like sort of humanity. Space Oddities is definitely this kind of inventive story about, I guess, love, mortality. I'm wondering, I hear all these themes that come up in your work. We talked about a little bit earlier. Like, is there something about the lyrics you write or the lyrics you're drawn to that is particularly Armenian or like is connected to, like Armenianness or Armenian identity, Armenian history, perhaps Armenian condition, Armenianness? What I'm curious if we can. I asked Seema this in the last installment. I'm kind of curious about that. How you respond to that? Is there something about your lyrics or the lyrics you're drawn to that are particularly Armenian?
I don't think I make a conscious effort
Right.
outside of so far what I've been doing with Gomidas to really think about the Armenian language or Armenian grammar, let's say, or vocabulary, and my English writing. So when I'm writing pop songs, American English songs, I'm not necessarily thinking about Armenian culture directly, but I've done so many songs that have the Armenian connection in there, in varying degrees. First of all,
Mhm.
collaborations with our other Armenians.
That's right.
I've collaborated with Jivan Gasparian Jr., Serge Tankian. A Chilla is an amazing hip hop producer who is behind Mikani Hogi, and he's also behind 333 or Yerek Ampoch Yerek Yerek or something like that. That's an interesting name. Beirut, Eraser Face, so many Armenian collaborators. Antrani Kizirian on the oud,
Mm.
Vahagan Turgutyan on the classical guitar, Samba Bayan of the Dirty Diamond. I mean, I've definitely been in the Armenian circle of musicians. Sirusho I've worked with, and actually Sirusho's experience was wonderful too, because that was one of pretty much my first and only real hybrid. No, it's not the only one. I'll tell you of others in a second. It's a hybrid song where there's Armenian and English lyrics in there, and there are a lot of translations and stuff like that. They're all case by case experiences. So some songs definitely have the Armenian influence just by nature of the collaborations with Armenian artists. But the strictly non-Armenian American pop stuff that I do mostly with capital cities doesn't directly look at Armenian songs, but I feel like it's just kind of inside me. I'm Armenian, so naturally, without realizing subconsciously, the melodies are gonna have a little bit of an Armenian twist to them, spice to them.
Yeah, I mean, there's that line. I know we're going to move into questions in a moment, I think, timing wise for our schedule, but I do want to just reference this line that I thought was indicative of individuals who maybe come from, let's say, smaller countries, um, or countries that may not always be in the sort of mainstream media's attention sphere, and I'm thinking about the line from Edge of Nowhere where you say we're at the edge of nowhere, yet we're everywhere. Um, Obviously, to Armenians, Armenia is not nowhere; it's everywhere, and it's where you're walking currently. You see visions of it, energy of it, the you know smells, the taste are transported. But I think that to the world, sometimes it can feel that way, that we're sort of you know disappearing or disappeared. If certainly history is complicated in that way, and we don't necessarily need to engage with that unless you want to. But this idea of that paradox, which is at the crux of that line, this like we're everywhere, even though it's can be deemed as nowhere. And I don't know if you were thinking about that at all, but I do think that your lyrics unconsciously, perhaps, address this Armenian identity, Armenian history, Armenian ancestry, Armenian, you know, Armenian condition, you know. So it's something to think about. I don't know if you want to comment on that before we go to questions.
Yeah, totally. A lot of my songs do come from my Armenian experience, and then oftentimes I'll try to make it more universal. I don't
That's
want
right.
to
That's right.
pigeonhole it, but everybody's going through very similar things.
That's
Edge of
right.
Nowhere is kind of a rebel without a cause song,
Right.
where I'm touting my rebelliousness. We're at the edge of nowhere, and yet we're everywhere. So it's like almost like we're rebels. We want to fight against this system, let's say, but we
Right.
don't even know what we're fighting against or what we personally really stand for, and we're all really trying to figure this out. But you know what? I'm still confident enough to say, you know, we're everywhere. We don't know why or how but you know what? We're
Right.
here and we're gonna express ourselves even if we're not sure about what's going on. You know?
Right, right. Like the persona that's created is its own persona. Like I don't think it's necessarily an Armenian persona. I'm wondering sort of how that Armenianness weaves its way into your, through the unconscious.
Yeah, all
I
the
wanted
time.
to shift gears, and I know that we have some questions. I want to also say that if there were questions before my abrupt departure, and I apologize for that, I have lost those questions. So maybe I can ask either Olivia or Hofstep to bring those up, or some people can retype those questions. But maybe I could start with Olivia's question, if that's okay. Olivia Katranjan, who's the founder of Yalla and our really the in many ways the captain of the ship, has asked, when we hear a song, my daughter is always asking me what lyrics mean. She loves Jeff Buckley's Hallelujah, so do I, but can't understand why someone.
Leonard
um,
Cohen.
yeah, what's that?
Leonard Cohen.
Yes, that's right. Leonard Cohen. By someone, what does it say there? I can't read that line there. Is tying another person to the kitchen chair, right?
I need to pull up the lyrics because I'm like
It's a fantastic thing. Yeah. So how much do
not
you want to
remember.
tell a story through your music? Yeah, you can pull up the lyrics. How much are we telling a story through music? Is I think the question, right? And our listeners and have your listeners understand what you're trying to say. Like, is it about storytelling, or is it more about sort of using images, sometimes narrative images or images related to a narrative, that kind of, rather than telling a story, somehow get at an experience, right? Get at the experience as opposed to deliver the story. It's a good question. A really interesting question.
Yeah, art in general, but obviously poetry and writing is so personal, and it's you do have to do a lot of filtering and editing after you lay down your initial gut feelings, because you might realize that the reader isn't going to get it, and so sometimes you just kind of eliminate or delete thoughts and ideas altogether because you realize, you know what, they're just not going to get what I'm trying to say here. It's just not working. And this is an interesting example. The Leonard Cohen Hallelujah lyrics. I mean, Leonard Cohen was obviously one of the best lyricists of all time, but he does get dark and twisted and very adult, right? And so I'm reading that line. Your faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof. Her beauty and the moonlight overthrew you, and she tied you to her kitchen chair, and she broke your throne, and she cut your hair, and from your lips, she drew the hallelujah. It's definitely an adult scene that only like adults like would understand. So I'm always running into that dilemma of how to expose my children. I have three kids, 12, 8, and 1.5. And, I have maybe two songs in the over 100 songs that I've written that use the F word in it. and we can't listen to it at the house because they're very much like, "Oh, Baba, that has the F word. We can't listen to it." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's a good song. Okay, fine." And it would approach that F word, and we'd have to skip over it. Or if I fail to skip over it, the kids will yell and scream at that moment to bleep it out. So you do have to think about the audience you're writing for. And Olivia's question is great because it touches on that idea of who's your audience. And so you do have to adapt and filter based on knowing your audience. Unless you're a real pure artist and you don't care about your audience and a lot of these songwriters are like that. And I think Leonard Cohen was one of them. And he didn't care about how it was going to be interpreted, and he just went for it. So it's up to the listener in this case to decide how to interpret the lyrics, and then of course then the difficult task of explaining it to your kids.
It's a tough one. I mean, you're bringing in Samson, there's Bible stuff, there's definitely this interpersonal relations. It is a complicated layering, I think. And Leonard Cohen, you mentioned right at the beginning of our conversation the difference between poetry and lyric writing, and there is a difference, and we talked about that earlier. What's fascinating is that Leonard Cohen is probably the one that sort of lessened that distance, bridge that gap, perhaps as good if or maybe other songwriters. I'm thinking of Joni Mitchell. I'm thinking of
and Jeff Buckley himself. Wow,
well, Buckley's remarkable. Yeah. So I mean, there are so many. I'm gonna see if there are other questions here. Please feel free to put them in the chat. That would be great, and then we can kind of read them to Sebu and see if anyone else has some questions that they want to bring up about lyric writing or his own particular process, or other things that had come up in the conversation today that you want to kind of maybe circle back to. I know there was some discussion about the Gomidas song. So if someone had written something there that they want to ask about, if they could just bring that up again, that would be great.
And then
in the meantime,
I could put in some more links to other videos.
Sure. In the meantime, I could also bring up for you another question that I had too, which is this notion of I don't know if you know the poet Adrian Rich, but Adrian Rich had said that the moment when a feeling enters a body is political. And firmly believe that all poetry is political, like this act of writing, the choice of language, and the refusal to address the world are all kind of these political acts. So I was thinking about, we're talking about this bridge between lyrics and poetry. I wonder if lyric writing in some ways is, because it does have poetic elements, is a kind of a political act, or can be a political act. And I was wondering about because you've written about some interesting topics for sure. There's one on standing rock. I think there's a few different songs that you've penned that are, I think, let's call them political or what have you. But do you think that all writing is political? I'm just curious what you think of Adrian Rich's line and kind of how you feel about lyric writing with regard to that.
Yeah, no, all writing is certainly not political, but all writing can be and should also be. I do sugar packet pop songs sometimes, and sometimes I want to tackle serious topics as best as I can. Sometimes something happens in this world that I often feel helpless when bad things are happening around the world, and I can't do anything about it, but I can, I guess, or I can try, because I'm a songwriter and that's what I do. So I have definitely written a number of protest songs. One was Standing Rock, when the Standing Rock thing happened. Another is Love Bullets, which was kind of a response to the Artsakh and Azerbaijan Armenia wars that actually started in 2016. Even there was like a smaller war that happened, and Beirut actually reached out to me and said, "Hey man, let's write a song that talks about that a little bit." And we wrote that, we couldn't complete it. It kind of got shelved. People stopped talking about that issue. So, but then in 2020, when the war picked back up, Beirut reached out to me, said, "Man, we got to finish that song and release it." So we released that. So that was definitely a direct kind of protest song. All this warmongering that the U.S. does, not just recently, but ever since 2016 era, actually, with the whole Syrian civil war, the U.S. involvement in wars and kind of our encouragement of these wars really bugs me. And so I did write some songs protesting that. There was one in particular that was kind of trying to criticize what was happening in Israel and Palestine. I never got around to complete it, and the timing ended up not being right because I started writing it during the Biden era, and then finished it during the Trump era. So like the context didn't work. I'm anti both sides, by the way. Any side that promotes war is not good. There are others, and I could make a list of some of these songs that I got involved politically. Of course, there's Armenian stuff. There's an Armenian genocide song that I participated in with Armene called "We Are Still Here."
Yes.
And I'm proud of that one. I don't have like this active agenda to become
Right.
somebody that changes the world politically, but I can't help but write about these things. There's a song called "The Secret Is Out," which is kind of a pro veterans song that it takes the United States angle, the problems that our veterans and the trauma and the stress, the PTSD that our veterans in the States experience when they go out there. And this was written when that topic was kind of more in your face about 10 years ago. And it was after that I realized that, man, the entire world is getting traumatized in very extreme, horrible ways. Where do I even begin? You know, it's such a sad situation, to be honest, to have to even think about those things as an artist. I'd rather just talk about flowers and moons and stars and pretty
Your
things.
work, Sebu, has brought a lot of joy and release and contemplation to so many listeners around the world. And we're really, really thankful that you've joined us today for this discussion of the lyric writing and performance as well. And we want to thank you so much for being here. As we kind of wrap up here, I know that there in the chat, Sebu left some links for you all to look at. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this discussion, which had such a range of kind of emotions and topics, and definitely want to thank Sebu for setting aside this time. I want to thank Hofsep and Olivia on the Yalla. And in fact, I'm going to turn it over to Olivia for the final few minutes here. And I do know that, I'm without people checking out this work and commenting and connecting and supporting music and the arts, there really is, we need, there really is no us, right? We need great art. Every poet needs great audiences. Every lyricist, needs great audiences. So thank you for that. And Olivia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Alan. You're amazing. I really appreciate
My pleasure, man.
attention.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both, Sebu and Alan, Alan for running such a thoughtful discussion, and Sebu for your music. This was such a treat. I hope you will all seek out and listen to Sebu's music and lyrics. As always, we have a lot going on at Yalla. Applications for our annual summer mentorship program are open until March 31st. Every year, we give emerging writers the opportunity to work with an Armenian author for 2 months in fiction, creative nonfiction, poetry, and literary translation. You can visit our website to learn more and to apply. We've just announced the Sarkisian Workshop Series in partnership with MISNA and the Asian American Writers Workshop. It's funded by the Sarkisian Foundation for the Arts and Engineering. These 6 literary workshops will engage with some of the most pressing issues of our day, bringing writers from marginalized communities together to engage with the climate crisis and our socio-political moment, including workshops like crafting insurgencies and resisting erasure. I will facilitate the first workshop on March 29th on imagining alternative futures. Registration will be available on our website in the coming days, and I hope you will join us. Lastly, Yala is celebrating our 5th anniversary with an online fundraiser and a special event in Los Angeles on March 22nd. We have built a community that spans the world, from New York to Australia, from London to Lebanon. Thank you all for being part of this thriving community. And lastly, as we witness horrifying violence around the world, I hope you and your loved ones are safe. Thank you.